Hey, Wealth Warriors, are you ready to redefine wealth and master your money mindset? Welcome back to Women of Wealth, where generational wisdom meets ambition.
I'm your millennial host, Ali Ramo.
And I'm your Gen X host, Hollywood's Gray. Together, we bring our experience from worlds of entrepreneurship, insurance, and financial services to help women build businesses, grow their wealth, and protect their futures that they've worked so hard to create.
Today's episode is one every entrepreneur needs to hear, especially if you're building a brand, launching offers, or creating content online.
Because today we're talking about something that many business owners overlook until it's too late: protecting your business legally. The truth is, one simple branding mistake, marketing oversight, or intellectual property issue can quickly turn into a costly lesson.
And that's why today's conversation is titled, Have You Been Sued or Screwed?
We love that one. So we're excited today to welcome our guest, attorney Cheryl Hodgson, founder of Remarkable Legal. Cheryl is a highly respected business attorney who specializes in helping entrepreneurs protect their brand, their intellectual property, and their business they're working so hard to build.
Through her work, Cheryl helps business owners navigate the legal side of entrepreneurship, everything from trademarks and contracts to marketing compliance and intellectual property protection. Say that one 5 times fast.
Right? All of these. And what we love about Cheryl's approach is that she focuses on prevention, helping entrepreneurs avoid the kind of legal mistakes that can derail a business before it ever happens.
Because let's be honest, most entrepreneurs don't start their businesses thinking about legal strategy, but it can be one of the most important parts of protecting your success.
Cheryl, welcome to Women of Wealth. We're so excited to have you here today.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be here.
Can you just introduce yourself for our listeners so they can get an idea of what you do and how you got here?
Oh, I ran into Holly last week and she liked the topic. So no, I've been practicing law for a long time. And I was originally a music lawyer and I did a lot of that. But right out of law school, I got involved as what they call a low-life associate, an entry-level job, working with a boutique firm in Denver that won the biggest trademark case in the history of trademark law. And that was a long time ago. But it was a great learning experience because I basically spent 2 years in the law library learning everything you could possibly need to know about trademarks. And then I still didn't learn that much because it is a lot more complicated than people realize as far as from the lawyer standpoint. But anyway, so that kind of got me interested in the field and I always just stuck with it, even though I was a music lawyer and I've done a lot of work in that field. And then I became a federal court litigator. And I was doing, for about over 20 years, I did cases involving music contracts, copyright infringement, trademark infringement, kind of the whole gambit. And so I got a lot of good experience. But somewhere along the way, I realized I don't really that's not where I'm happiest. Do you know what I mean? It's like I really enjoy working with entrepreneurs and business owners and, helping them see how to build their business and create something of value. That's how I learned that how important that was by being in litigation, because over the years I'd meet people who got in trouble and they didn't do anything wrong. None of us knows what it is we don't know. So they didn't know to think about certain things, or they didn't consider some simple things that they thought, well, it'll never happen to me, or I don't have to worry about that, and then it comes out of the woodwork. So, that's when I finally realized, well, the mess people need to know more about. It's just like working in the insurance field. You kind of need to know it's mitigating risk. That's what it's about. You're mitigating risk for life events in the case of insurance, possibly, because you don't want to bear the catastrophic cost of something with insurance. And being proactive, even with some basic things in business, can make all the difference in the world. If you don't need it, be happy, but thank God you have it if you do.
Absolutely. So let's jump right into it and let's talk about some of those big mistakes that entrepreneurs make. A lot of times, even for my business, I know when I first started, I was looking at how do I market? How do I make a sale? I would never thought about what do I need to do to protect it? So what are some of those common legal mistakes that you see business owners make when they're starting or scaling?
Well, I because I do a lot of work in trademarks, I've seen that, and I see that a lot. And I mean, not everybody needs a trademark. So let's start there. Not every business needs a trademark. If you're strictly a local business and you're a dry cleaners or a florist, and you're not going to ever go outside your local zone of where your clients or customers are, and that was how it is, And but one of the things is that where I think people make a mistake or have a lack of information is since the internet began, there's a lot of misinformation about in marketing in particular. Well, all you need is a descriptive domain name, right? For SEO purposes. Well, I'm not saying it's not okay to have that, but spending $100,000 to get a domain that you think is going to help you get a bunch of people there, it turns out that's not really what Google looks at anyway for search engine ranking. So it's kind of a myth. There's a myth right there. I mean, you'd be better off to put that money into, protecting your building or getting a structure for your business. So, I mean, that's one thing. And really, I think there's that myth about people will go out and they'll start a business and they don't think about there's two parts to it. Won't think about registering a trademark to begin with. Number one, because maybe they can't afford it. Or number two, well, I don't really need that because I have the domains. And I've had a lot of people come to me and say, well, I already own the domain, so I don't need a trademark. Well, there's a big difference between a domain and a trademark. A domain is like your street address. It's where you live on the internet. It doesn't have anything to do with what you sell. Nothing. I mean, it has nothing to do with protecting a marketing zone. A trademark gives you, on the other hand, once you have it, it carves out exclusive rights to market your product or service and expand your business. That's really important. It allows you to orderly expand over the years without worrying that somebody else is going to come in and, and if they do, you have a tool to say, hey, I own this.
So what about starting their business, like getting an LLC, an S Corp, a C Corp? I mean, I think that I know in my business, we usually tell people once you're making $75,000 to $100,000, you need to look into what way you're going to structure your business. Before that, they're independent contractors. So they're 1099, but they really don't know anything about how to run a business from a legal standpoint of starting a business.
But and it's super important because nowadays, first of all, forming an LLC is not expensive at all anymore. Now there's two important things to remember about qualifications on that. If it's a solo LLC and just only you and your business, then those are really straightforward. But then if you have a partner that you're not married to, that's a more significantly important to address other legalities at the same time when you file that LLC. So that's where people make a big mistake. And I mean, I've actually seen several people in that situation in the last 2 years, where they're partners with somebody for extended period of time, and then they decide they're going to dissolve it, or one person's going to leave, or whatever. And then it's all about the buyout. What are the terms of the buyout? And if you don't have that well-drafted operating agreement, and I highly recommend not taking one off the internet, or because that's how you end up in lawsuits. The ones that are some of those are just hideous. And I mean, it really has to do for both sides, the fairness of what's it really worth? What's the value? It comes into valuation, that comes up. And also without it, especially if you have a partner, what happens if, nobody likes to think about those things, but if one party gets in an accident or passes away or is disabled, do you want to be partners with their spouse? Do you want them to suddenly be in your business? And without that buy-sell agreement, that's exactly what happens.
Sure.
Then on the other hand, there's another wonderful value to having an LLC or corporation for a structure. It's a home for your assets. If you have everything in your name, and whether it's a vehicle or a delivery truck or even your intellectual property, it's like, number one, it's going to go through probate if something happens to somebody. You know what I mean? If it's in an LLC, you can set up membership of the LLC or the stock in a corporation to be owned by a family trust, so it doesn't get hung up in court if something happens to somebody. So there's that can be a form of estate planning, without spending a lot of money. I mean, I had a pretty famous author who died a few years ago, and his trademark was in his name. And guess what? I spent almost a year and a half last year and the year before with his probate attorney in Florida. They had to go back, reopen the estate, get permission to transfer the name into an LLC. And, now it's all finally done. But that could have been easily avoided had they thought about it a little differently at the time they registered the name.
Wow, that's crazy. So going back to, the trademark and designating your business appropriately, if someone has a partner and they have a business idea and they're ready to go, what is the order in things that you would recommend with trademark and websites and designating an S corp versus an LLC? What does that look like with starting a business from scratch?
Well, where would you like to start? There's 3 or 4 questions there. I'm cheesy. 3 or 4 topics,
What would be the first step you would recommend somebody new?
Well, I think number one, even if you can't do it all, get a checklist of what you might need to do over the next few years. And if you feel like it's overwhelming, I mean, I like to say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. It's a metaphor. But I mean, if you can't afford to do everything at once, try to say, okay, well, this is the most important thing. And also, as far as an LLC goes, I think that's important because of the risk of personal liability as well. Because then I know somebody who's been in a lawsuit the last 2 years, and they weren't my client, but turns out she didn't have an LLC or corporation. Well, all of her sizable personal assets were at risk because, that's what the people who are suing you would go after, right? If it's not in a corporation. So that's a big reason right there. Now, if you're, just coaching or something, but I don't know. I mean, it's subjective, So that's one thing. And again, to get having a structure for your business, it also, to me, it's like, it may be a skeleton or, a 2-bedroom cottage when you start out, but over time you have a way or a place to house everything. You know what I mean? And you can evolve and grow, and your contracts, the people you hire under consulting, employees, if you need some at some point, then all of those things need a business structure, I think. It's just a better way to. And I like, there's a lawyer I know he calls himself the millionaire's lawyer, and his whole thing is begin with the end in mind. Is what is it? What is your dream? What is your big, hairy, audacious goal? What's your blue sky, right? Your blue ocean. What is it you see and you're dreaming of working towards, right? So. I mean, because that makes a difference of how you approach things, and your own attitude about it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even when we're working with our clients and helping them with their retirement, we start with the end in mind, and we work from there. Going into trademarks, businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs create business names, podcast names, program names, Facebook pages or groups without checking trademarks. What are some basic steps someone could take before naming a brand or a product?
Well, number one, you should at least try to do a search at the trademark office. And I say that with a qualified, don't rely on it 100%, because it doesn't always pick everything up. Let's put it that way. And for example, foreign translations, but it can be a good starting point to go to the trademark office and see what other people have the name. And I think one of the things that people get confused by if they're haven't had a lot of experience in business, because I've had people tell me, well, I have an LLC or I have a corporation. Why do I need a trademark? Right? And an LLC is just the name under which you do business. It has nothing to do. Trademarks are, like I mentioned earlier, trademarks are to carve out, and I call it your sandbox. It's your playground within which you can expand and grow your business and have a zone of exclusive rights. So that if somebody comes too close, it's like recording the deed to your house, metaphorically speaking. if you came home tonight and you own a home and somebody had pitched a tent in your front yard and decided, well, I'm going to hang out here, you don't have to worry about it because your deed is recorded. It's a public record. The world is charged with constructive notice. And a registered trademark is the same thing. It provides, and it gives you, it's that expansion and reach. I mean, you may start out with one location, but I have a client who started out mostly on the internet. They had one retail store. Now they suddenly have 12 in 4 states, and it took them 10 years to get there, but now they're rapidly expanding. But that was one of the first things they cared about, but they're also a consumer brand, consumer brands. If you're selling anything on the internet, even services, but particularly consumer brands, you really need a trademark. Whether it's a food product or a fashion brand or just any kind of physical product, because where you run into trouble is, and this is the other flip side of it, people will also say, well, I have the domain, right? So I don't need a trademark. But the domain is not tied to, I'll go back for a second. When the internet first started, the first lawsuits were all about, a lot of them were about Google selling the names of the trademarks and as advertising search terms. That was a huge amount of litigation, went on for years. And that was where the early cases came from. And so this doctrine of what they call initial interest confusion is where you're diverting traffic from one person to another. Because up until then, I always said trademarks were like a box of grocery store cereal on the grocery store shelf. They didn't go anywhere. You might see them advertised on Saturday morning cartoons, or you might get a flyer from your grocery store saying, oh, Raisin Bran's on sale this week. Right? That's it. Beyond that, it didn't go anywhere, right? So, because there was no internet, it didn't go international instantly. So the whole stakes changed, and now there's 500 domain endings. So not just searching that, but at least doing a Google search to find out, back to your question, what really else is out there that might be competitive. Now, if it's totally unrelated, it's not a problem. But if it's competitive to what you want to do, you should at least find out.
Yeah. So we titled this podcast, Have You Been Sued or Screwed? Can you give us any real life examples? I mean, you mentioned somebody, one of your authors. Without naming names, can you give us any examples of some times where you've had to be brought in because people were getting sued or they were getting screwed out of their business and their intellectual property or whatever?
Well, I just had, because it's fresh on my mind, I just had a consultation with a new client, and it's, in a financial services field, and they've been in business for many, many years, and he's owned the domain for a really long time. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, he decided to start using it for a certain aspect of the financial services field. And he just got an email last week saying, guess what? I own the federal trademark for this. Now, the guy didn't threaten to sue him. He was very, but he's got a problem.
Right.
So he's built a website, but by the end of the conversation, he's like, well, this is the lesson I needed to learn, and I think they'll be able to settle it, but now he's got to rebrand that part of his business, and he never really thought about it. And another story that's actually, to me, a little more dramatic is a fashion brand that I know. I was not representing them then, but they had a very successful brand at a very young age. And apparently they had a partner who was stealing inventory out the back door and putting another label on it.
Wow.
And once they found that out, they left. But guess what? They also gave up their names. And their names are still on a product they have nothing to do with.
Wow.
But because they had a great reputation and they were the designers, they were able to relaunch and get funding relatively quickly. And that's where I got that phrase, have you been sued or screwed? Because it's 12 years later, and guess what? I have never once had to talk about, do you want to do this or do not? Maybe a little bit, we all have budgets, but what I'm saying is they care and they're involved. They want to know that everything's protected. So, I mean, they have a different mindset towards it because they went through that, and kind of had lost everything and had to start over.
So what are some ways, and I'm curious of how AI has affected trademarks and things like that. But how can people protect their intellectual property from being copied or stolen?
You're asking a question that we'd all like to know the answer to. I mean, I would say so far in trademarks, I don't think it has come to the front and fore, but doesn't mean it's not going to. I would say the biggest issue with AI, because this has only been going on for the last 3 years, is copyright and content. That's where the issue is, and that's where all the litigation is. And I listened to a presentation by a woman attorney, very prominent attorney in Los Angeles, I've known for years, who's very active in Washington and in music field. And she helped pass what they call the Music Modernization Act about 3 or 4 years ago, which they're still trying to implement. But she was very blunt, and she was trying to tell people, if there looks like there's a bill pending in Congress, and that the only way it's ever going to get Congress to pass it to try to protect it is from a content standpoint, particularly with voice and image, particularly for celebrities and singers and songwriters. But it's not just them; it's ordinary people too. That it's probably going to have to be a compulsory license where you can't say no, because it's how do you enforce it? But then you have the right to get paid for it. So no matter whether somebody takes it or not, you'll be able to get compensation. So that's kind of the direction it sounds like it's heading. Otherwise, it could go on for years trying to come up with something. I don't know. It's all in process now, and but how do you compete with these companies, these chat companies that are hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars? I was just reading this morning, New York Times did a thing, and this is not relating to something, but do you know that they identified hundreds of fake videos that they proved, and they published a whole bunch of them on the front page of the New York Times today, that were fake things being bombed, fake buildings being destroyed, fake people being killed. All this is fake stuff that's not real at all, that's being put out all over the internet and social media about what's going on in Iran.
Oh, wow.
So that kind of took me aback, because I'm like, I probably would, if I saw some of that, I would, when I looked at it, I'm like, how do I know that it's not real?
Exactly. That's pretty scary, right? To see that even the news stations don't know if it's real or not real.
That's how I felt. I felt, wow, this is really, it's kind of scary that this is what our society's come to. But, but it has positive value, but it is, but I think it becomes even more important, especially in trademarks, because the part is there. I do represent quite a few authors, and I'll tell you why you need a trademark for authors. That's not a product, but they need it badly, because all the fake things that come out, like if you have a YouTube channel, or I have a client who's had 4 best-selling books in the last 2 years, and she just released her 4th book, and it's like there's fake books up all over Amazon for sale.
That was going to be my next question, actually. I was going to ask you, many of our listeners create courses, books, coaching programs, or frameworks. What are some of the best ways to protect your intellectual property from being copied or stolen?
Well, that I can answer, because I've done that a lot since the internet began. Because, I've represented Hay House for years, and I'm very grateful, by the way. That gave me the opportunity to really kind of zero in on that niche. To answer that quickly, a book, this is the important part to know. The title of a book and by itself cannot be a trademark. However, there's a lot of ways to create a trademark based on what you just talked about, Holly, which is if you create a course, you can title the course the same as the book. You can do a training, aside from just a course, like a certification training can be related to that. And so that's the main thing. But what it allows you to do is, it's not necessarily suing the individual. You want a mechanism for taking the content down at Facebook and YouTube and all that. And without a trademark, they're not going to do anything. They absolutely won't do a thing. So for one of my clients, I've been wrestling with it because the only thing she really had was the titles to the book that they're registered in Europe and the US, but the way they were doing it, I didn't have a trademark for the books themselves, right? So I've come up with a strategy that I hope will work. So we're seeing now if it'll work, but yeah, no, so that's the way to do it, is the courses. And also you can do a series. If you're willing to have a series, you can also get a series. And then also you can have downloadable things. Books now are not just, in fact, the downloadable items can be as important to protect as the old paper versions, because people aren't using things in paper anymore.
Right.
So if some of our listeners are hearing this and they're like, uh-oh, I've made some mistakes along the way. What should I do now? What are some steps that they can take to make sure their business and their intellectual property is protected legally?
It can be overwhelming if you feel like you don't know. So number one, try to get some good advice if you do want to talk to an attorney. But number two is, I go back to what I said before, you don't have to do everything at once. I kind of remember back one of the first big clients I had, and it was in an odd field, but I represented for over 20 years. It was a company here in Irvine, and it was kind of an odd specialty, but it was like they were a company that these guys had bought up an old company that had been around since the mid-70s. And they were like the engineer's resource for every little electronic widget, piece of wire, everything on the planet. It went on submarines and ships and everywhere. And when they came to me, they were concerned because somebody had they didn't even have a digital catalog yet. This was pre-digital. Their litigators referred them to me, and they somebody had literally stolen their product catalog in India and reproduced the whole thing. And, the truth was, I said, well, you can sue these people, but what are you going to get? They have no assets and they don't do business here. So you're going to waste a lot of money for a piece of paper you can't do anything with. But then I said, what'd be more important is to think about what are you going to do going forward here in the United States, right? So we started looking at it, and they had 3 trademarks, and 2 of them were expired, and they didn't even know it. And those are the ones they bought when they bought the company, and nobody talked about the trademarks to them when they bought the company. And so over the next 15 years, we didn't do everything at once. And the reason why I'm saying that is I think you just have to look at it as whether it's 5 things or 20 things, that you feel like you want to protect or get started on, whether it's your LLC, just do, it's like they didn't do everything at once. Their CFO would go, okay, well, we're going to budget this much this year, right? And then they would add a few countries. They would say, because, it adds up. It's a lot of money when you're going international. And so, yeah, that was a very meaningful thing. But they've actually, after 15 years, they bought up almost every company in the United States, and they were this huge conglomerate. And all the in-house lawyers and all the lawyers that represented all those people they bought up were like, we want the business. So they were by then had a big M&A firm in Philadelphia or Boston, I think it was. So, they took over all the trademark stuff at that point. So, but, I got to represent them for 20 years. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk contracts. This will be the last question, and then I'd love for you to share with our listeners how they could get in touch with you, and then we'll go into the lightning round. But what are some contracts that most business owners either need to have in place if they're working with clients, partners, you already talked about a little bit, or vendors? And then what are some really, really good things to look out for if you are signing a contract?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think there's a couple of things right off the bat. They're the most important, and they're easy. You don't need a lawyer for them, particularly. Um, you might want to get a template or something so you could use the same one. Number one, even with an independent contractor, you need something in writing. Like, if they're a consultant or something, do a consulting agreement so it's clear what the deliverables are, what they're going to pay. And what you really want in that written agreement is a good confidentiality clause. That, if you're going to disclose, if you have somebody doing your financial stuff, or if you're, they're going to have access to things in your business that you just want to make sure they understand. They have to hold it in confidence. That's pretty standard, but it's really helpful to have that. And then if they're delivering product to you or delivering work product to you of any creative content, it's really important to put in language about work for hire. And that's where I've seen people make a big mistake, because the copyright law, this is not trademarks, but whether it's develop a content, doing a software app, which is considered copyrightable content, all that stuff. If you commission a work from somebody and they work on their own and they're not your full-time employee, they retain the ownership rights unless you have them sign a work for hire agreement. That's just the way it works. And
I'm glad that I learned that early, because, not every person who've come to work for me have I had a contract with, but I did learn recently that that's something that I needed. I don't know if it's from you or from someone else that I was listening to, Cheryl. And so, I won't even loan any of my agents money without knowing what the payment plan is going to be,
oh no, it's really important.
With not giving not getting a written agreement, like, hey, I'm going to give you $700 and you're going to pay me back when,
Well, no, absolutely. You just, it's good business, and it keeps everything straight and above board, and you hope you put it in the drawer and hope you never need it. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So that's really important. And then, but I think those are really important. And then, where the other thing is, I think people, especially if they're going for investment money, and I've done a lot of work in years past in the music industry, buying, selling catalogs of music product, whether it's, and so it was just interesting in that experience because I represented a public company that I helped set up here in business in the US, and they were buying catalogs. So there were a number of different situations, but it made me learn in that instance over that period of time that, not all NDAs are created equally. They're not the same. And so taking an NDA off the internet isn't always bad, but you need to know what the circumstances are. Like, I'll give you a specific example. This happened with my ex-husband years ago. Before I met him, he made an introduction to somebody who put millions of dollars into the company he was working for. And he actually had a non-circumvention agreement. So part of the NDA was non-circumvention, which is I introduce these people. It's not just about them taking my confidential information. It's if they get together and do a deal and get married, they're not going to leave me out of it, right? In terms of at least compensating me for having had them raise $3 billion,
Right.
And that was 20 years ago. So, that I'm just saying that it's an example of where NDAs are not all the same. What is it you're doing, and you got to ask that question.
Well, that's a really good point, because I had a situation where Allie knows about this. We have a new product that we're rolling out right now, and I have somebody who I know that I introduced to another company, and they were able to put their product into this other product, right? But I didn't get compensated for it. And even our CEO tried to go to bat for me, but I didn't have anything signed by either one of the parties. I just had email introductions, and I never negotiated anything. But now I know not to do that again. If I'm going to introduce them and they're going to be able to put their product into our product and we're going to be selling it, I can get a piece of that pie.
Well, I'll tell you what, I learned it myself in a really bad way. And I hit somebody I thought I was working with, a best friend in Europe. I ended up helping them. They ended up getting a deal for a song based on my introductions, and they made over $1 million.
Oh my goodness.
And the guy just like didn't know me. He acted like he did not know who I was. and yeah, it broke my heart because I was
It's
on.
not
And
always guys though.
What?
It's not always guys. I've met women that are like that too.
Oh yeah. No, I agree with you. Yeah.
I know. But we have examples of men and women people. So anyway,
Yeah.
Cheryl,
Yeah. Okay.
what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to work with you, or they
probably just
find out if they want to work with you?
Yeah, well, my email is probably the best to start with, because if I'm not around, I always answer. I'm always checking email. Cheryl@remarkablelegal.com. And then also, I'm on LinkedIn, it's Cheryl Hodgson. And I'm not as active on Facebook, only because I've been hacked twice on Facebook. And I have 2 accounts, and one of them they still won't let me back into 4 years later. They gave it to somebody in China, but so I don't spend a lot of time trying to solve the world's problems on Facebook.
You also have a lot of great resources on your website. Tell them about that.
Oh, yes. Well, I have another website called Brand Aid, and that one has been geared towards trademarks, but and I have a law firm website. So the easiest way to find me is Remarkable Legal. But if you want to learn about trademark stuff, there's a lot of free content and downloads on at Brand Aid with an E. It's one word, BRANDAIDE.com.
Great.
So, and I have 2 seasons of podcasts episodes on there too.
Awesome.
So.
Awesome. Well, we're going to go into the lightning round questions.
Oh, that's the fun part.
So quick yes or no's, or maybe a little bit of a description. Yes or no, do I need a trademark for my podcast name?
Yes. The answer is yes. From my own personal experience in spending 2 years trying to get one and being turned down by the trademark office. And if I had not been able to be a lawyer to myself, I spent a lot of time and effort fighting
it. Should I copyright my
and
work?
it wasn't the other person that did anything wrong. It was the trademark office. So and when it comes to podcasts, for whatever reason, their new thing is they equate, if you have a name of a podcast and it's related to anything in business, and somebody else has a trademark in anything related to business, they're going to go, oh, you can't have a podcast by that name, because people who are in business also have a podcast. So therefore, even they're in a totally different field, they want me to have it. So I kept fighting them, and I finally got it. But so.
Awesome. Okay. So should I copyright my course?
Yes. And that's super easy. You don't need a lawyer. Put the copyright notice, C with a circle, the year of first publication, and, all rights reserved, and go to copyright.gov, G-O-V, and you can download the forms, or you don't have to download them. You can create a free account, and you fill out if it's written materials, VX, if it's audio, you can do videos, and now you can fill out the form and just upload them. Nice. And if you want to do a collection of like a lot of things at once, say you have a whole bunch of episodes of a podcast or something, you can send in a thumb drive, and they'll let you print out once you fill out the paperwork, you print out this sheet with a number on it, put that in, and you always send it by certified mail or FedEx, so you have a proof of delivery. I think it's $60 for each application now. Awesome. So it's not free, but it's certainly the best bargain you're going to get.
Okay.
One word to describe your leadership style.
First word that came to me is relentless. Like, I don't know if that's leadership style, but
yes,
when I get on a mission, I usually don't quit.
What's your go-to productivity hack?
My go-to productivity hack. Well, I am in love with Fathom.
Oh,
It's one
okay.
of the first one that's out, and it hooks up automatically to Zoom calls because I do almost all my client meetings on Zoom. And Fathom, once you get off the call, it sends you a summary with like notes for follow up that you can send to somebody. You can actually get the entire transcript, and you get a link to the recording, and they're all housed online. And you can, and believe me, I had it come up that I'm so glad I had it because I had a problem with a client last year or year before, and when they kind of forgot what the facts were, I had the Zoom recording and all the transcripts.
That's great.
And
Yeah.
that's the best thing since sliced bread, and it's not expensive to get a subscription to it.
Awesome.
What's a favorite business book or podcast you recommend?
Podcasts, I'm actually become a fanatic about listening to a group of younger guys who are not giving financial advice, but are analyzing stocks on YouTube. And they also turn them into podcasts. And I've been learning a lot from these guys. It's kind of inspiring.
Awesome. And if you could sit down for lunch or tea with any woman of wealth, past or present, who would it be?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Unfortunately, she's not alive, but I would. I was always in awe of her because she won a Pulitzer Prize for her book. Catherine, who bought not Moss, her family owned the Washington Post, and her dad bought it out of bankruptcy. And then her husband, who was the editor of the Harvard Law Review, they all lived together with all these chief justices and stuff when she was young. But she ended up running it in an era where Catherine Graham, thank you. And I think what it was about her is I read a quote about her that Adlai Stevenson, this is one of the famous people in our government years ago, said about her was that her opponents always tended to underestimate her, and that they didn't realize how powerful she really was. And so, being a lawyer that started out earlier where women really weren't given much of a chance, right? Women attorneys. And so, if you were too aggressive and stood up like a man did, they would say nasty things about you and attack you. But if you didn't, then I adopted that for a long time, just like lay back in the weeds and bless them and blast them when I needed to. So I don't know. I always thought she was I read her Pulitzer Prize winning book, and I thought it always stuck with me.
Awesome. Well, Cheryl, thank you so much for being a part of our show. We really appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me.